In January 2013, Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old university student from Canada, arrived in Los Angeles as part of a solo trip down the U.S. West Coast. She was described by her family as independent, thoughtful, and curious. She kept a public travel blog, writing candidly about her experiences and emotions. For many young travelers, her journey was familiar. A new city, a budget hotel, a few days of exploration before moving on. She checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles on January 26th. The location mattered. The Cecil had a long history, including periods of crime and hardship in the surrounding neighborhood. By 2013, parts of the building operated under a different name and model, but the hotel's reputation remained complicated. At first, Elisa's stay appeared ordinary. Staff and other guests later reported seeing her in common areas. She visited nearby locations, used public transportation, and remained in contact with family. She called home regularly. Then the contact stopped. On January 31st, Elisa was expected to check out. She did not. When her family failed to reach her, they reported her missing. The Los Angeles Police Department opened an investigation. The hotel was searched. Officers checked her room and questioned staff. Posters were distributed. Search teams canvassed the area. There was no immediate trace of her. In early February, investigators released surveillance footage recorded inside one of the hotel's elevators. The video quickly became the most recognizable element of the case, widely shared online, often without context. In the footage, Elisa enters the elevator and behaves in a way that appears confused or distressed. She presses multiple buttons. She steps in and out. She pauses in the doorway. At times, she appears to look down the hallway as if responding to something or someone unseen. Her gestures are unusual and her movements seem hesitant, almost as if she is deciding whether to stay inside the elevator or leave. It is important to note what the footage does and does not show. It does not show another person inside the elevator with her. It does not show anyone grabbing her. It does not show violence. It shows a moment of uncertainty, a person acting in a way that was later interpreted through the lens of tragedy. After the video was released, attention intensified. The public began to speculate about what her behavior meant. Investigators continued searching, but no confirmed sightings emerged. Then 2 weeks later, a new problem surfaced inside the hotel. Guests reported low water pressure, unusual taste, and discoloration in the tap water. Maintenance staff were dispatched to inspect the building's water system, including the rooftop tanks that stored water for the hotel. On February 19th, a worker climbed onto the roof and approached one of the large water cisterns. Inside, he discovered Elisa Lam's body. The discovery reframed the case instantly. Questions shifted from "where is she?" to "how did she get there?" The rooftop access was not designed for casual entry. Doors and stairwells were restricted. The roof itself was high and exposed, bordered by structures and equipment. The water tanks were large industrial units, elevated and enclosed. Their lids were heavy. The official investigation determined that Elisa had accessed the roof and entered the tank. The cause of death was ruled as accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant condition. Toxicology reports later indicated that alcohol and illicit drugs were not contributing factors, but the circumstances generated contradictions that fueled confusion. How did she reach the roof unnoticed? How did she enter the tank? How was the lid positioned afterward? Why were there no clear reports of her on the roof? These questions became central not because they proved foul play, but because the physical setting was difficult to visualize and the available information arrived in fragments, some accurate, some misunderstood. Hotel staff reported that Elisa had been moved from a shared room to a private room after other guests complained about her behavior. Those complaints were not always described consistently. Some accounts emphasized confusion or oddness. Others suggested disruption. The inconsistency added to the sense that there were missing details. Her family emphasized that Elisa had experienced mental health challenges in the past. Like many people living with bipolar disorder, she had periods of stability and periods of difficulty. The way her behavior in the elevator was interpreted often depended on the viewer's assumptions. The facts remain that she disappeared. A video was released, and her body was found in a closed water tank. At this halfway point, the case is defined by what is known and what is uncertain. A young woman traveling alone, a brief moment captured on surveillance, and a death in a place that feels inaccessible. The rest of the file is an attempt to reconstruct the path between those points, carefully, without sensationalism, and with respect for the person at the center of the story. In the weeks following the discovery of Elisa Lam's body, investigators focused on reconstructing her final movements without speculation. The challenge was not a lack of information, but the way fragments of that information were interpreted in isolation. The elevator footage remained central. When reviewed in its original, unedited form, it showed no external interference. The doors did not close because multiple buttons had been pressed, activating a safety delay. Elisa's movements, stepping out, re-entering, gesturing, were unusual, but not evidence of pursuit or coercion. No other individual appears in the frame. This matters because many later interpretations relied on altered versions of the video, slowed down or cropped, creating patterns that were not present in the source material. Investigators emphasize that the footage showed a person alone, not reacting to a visible threat. Access to the roof was examined next. While the rooftop was not open to guests, it was not impossible to reach. Fire escape routes, stairwells, and unsecured doors existed at the time. Hotel staff acknowledged that alarms were not always functional. The physical barriers were deterrents, not guarantees. The water tanks themselves were large cylindrical units with lids that could be lifted manually. Contrary to some reports, the lids were not locked. Investigators later stated that the lid of the tank containing Elisa was found open at the time of discovery. This detail was frequently misreported. The medical examination found no signs of physical assault. There were no fractures, no defensive injuries, and no evidence of restraint. Toxicology tests showed that prescribed medications for bipolar disorder were present at subtherapeutic levels, suggesting inconsistent use. No alcohol or illegal substances were found at levels that would impair judgment. The official ruling concluded that Elisa's death was an accident with bipolar disorder as a contributing factor. This conclusion does not suggest blame. It reflects an understanding that mental health conditions can alter perception, judgment, and impulse control, particularly under stress, fatigue, or disrupted routines such as travel. Critically, investigators found no evidence of another person involved in her death. That absence has often been treated as suspicious, but absence in this case was not a gap in the record. It was the record. The remaining questions largely stem from expectation rather than contradiction. People expect a closed tank to remain closed. They expect rooftops to be inaccessible. They expect distress to look a certain way. When reality does not align with those expectations, mystery fills the space. There were also institutional failures. The hotel's infrastructure was poorly maintained. Communication between staff and investigators was inconsistent. Public release of incomplete information allowed speculation to grow unchecked. These failures did not cause Elisa's death, but they shaped how it was understood. Over time, the case became less about a person and more about a symbol of fear, of urban legend, of unanswered questions. This shift often obscured the human reality. Elisa Lam was not a riddle. She was a young woman navigating a city alone, managing a mental health condition, and making decisions that may have felt logical to her in the moment. The environment she was in, a large, aging hotel with limited oversight, allowed those decisions to lead somewhere dangerous. The tragedy lies not in the unusual nature of the location, but in the convergence of vulnerability and opportunity. The case remains emotionally unresolved for many because it resists a narrative of clear intent. There was no crime to solve, no villain to identify, no single moment where everything went wrong in an obvious way. Instead, there was a gradual narrowing of options, a person alone, a building that did not protect her, a sequence of choices made under internal pressure. In such cases, the desire for alternative explanations is understandable. They offer distance from the discomfort of accepting that ordinary systems can fail and that accidents can occur in ways that feel implausible until they happen. The official findings have been reviewed, challenged, and re-examined. No new evidence has emerged to change them. Elisa Lam's death remains classified as accidental. What remains open is not the case file, but the responsibility to speak about it carefully, to avoid turning distress into spectacle, to remember that behind every frame of video and every line of a report was a real person with a life beyond the moment she was last seen. The file closes not with certainty but with restraint. Some tragedies do not leave mysteries to be solved. Only lessons about care, infrastructure, and how easily a private struggle can become public misunderstanding.